G'day, and welcome to Comics Mate, your mates in comics from the land down under. I'm Dean James, and today we're going to be talking about the fall of superhero movies and comic book culture as a whole. Many mainstream media outlets have been pondering the idea that comic book movie culture is dying, citing things like superhero fatigue and other nonsense like the fans are just racist and or sexist. Most recently, Variety has come out with an article that reads why the fall of comic book movie culture is inevitable. I'm here to tell you why they're wrong and offer a solution to the problem that not only superhero movies are facing, but all of Hollywood as well. So let's read through this article and debunk it as we do. Why the Fall of Comic Book Movie Culture is Inevitable by Owen Gleiberman. It's not just bad sequels, it's far simpler. The fantasy heroes have been strip-mined. Just, no. See, straight off the bat, this Owen Gleiberman dude obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. But let's actually hear him out, let's give him a chance. Comic book movie culture didn't just stumble this year, it face-planted, giving us one movie after another that fans didn't much care about, and that the corporations backing these films took a disquieting loss on. Well, yeah, we the fans have been telling Hollywood this for years now, and all they did was call us ists and foes, because all they care about is getting in their diversity, equity, and inclusion quotas so they can get that sweet, sweet ESG payout. What did you think was going to happen with the release of a sequel to Captain Marvel, the most disliked character in all of comics, who gets a new reboot every other year so they can continue to prop up their feminist icon? It's a movie they knew nobody wanted and was shoehorned in between Infinity War and Endgame because that was the only way it was ever going to make a profit. And on top of that, its sequel features two characters that nobody has ever heard of from two Disney Plus shows, WandaVision and the lowest rated Disney Plus show of all time, Miss Marvel. But anyway, let's keep reading. And that's not how it was supposed to go. According to the gospel of 21st century Hollywood, the words comic book film and box office disappointment are not supposed to appear in the same sentence. When they do, not just once, but over and over and over again, the tea leaves are telling us something ominous and maybe definitive. The only definitive thing here is that people don't like this woke culture. This far-left, divisive, and blatantly racist ideology that Disney is forcing into everything pisses off more than half your audience. Why in 2023 did this happen? The analysis that has mostly been offered is simple. The movie companies served up mediocre superhero product. And that's not necessarily true either. Spider-Man makes plenty of money whenever a new movie is released. The Batman made heaps of money. These are both highly successful films. Fact of the matter is, the people behind the scenes are the problem. They're so out of touch with what the general audiences actually want. Like when they were pushing things like The Flash, starring Ezra Miller, a literal criminal who nobody has any interest in and has little to no charisma on screen. But he's non-binary, so we can't fire him, even if he kidnapped a child. If it had just been one or two duds, the situation might have been explained away. But when you think back on Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and The Flash, and The Marvels, and Aquaman, The Lost Kingdom, all films nobody gave a shit about. Ant-Man was always one of the lowest grossing Marvel films, and I liked the first one. Like, the first one wasn't a bad movie, not the best movie I've ever seen, but it's not bad. Then you have Shazam, Fury of the Gods, The Flash, The Marvels. These are movies nobody asked for, and they have all had controversy behind the scenes one way or the other. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom featuring Amber Turd, everyone's favourite domestic abuser and bedshitter. And the pattern is clear. It's not simply a Marvel thing or a DC thing. The primal thrill and popularity of comic book movie culture took a major hit, and it may be fading away. It's fading away because they want to keep pushing their bullshit onto all of us instead of doing their jobs and just entertain. Look, I have nothing against women, but they've turned the MCU into the MSHU. And if you're trying to deny the fact that Marvel, DC, and comics as a whole were primarily a thing ingested by boys, then you are fighting a losing battle. You're always going to be going uphill against reality. In the very drubbing these movies received at the box office, and in the drumbeat snark of critical reviews, you might say there's hope. To call the online critics snarky is disingenuous and inaccurate at best. They are the biggest comic book fans. They're the people you're supposed to be making the movies for in the first place. These anti-woke type critics on YouTube didn't exist until Hollywood started doing this sort of thing. If you go back far enough, these people were just excited about these new movies coming out because they've been fans since they were little kids. They've got piles and piles of comic books in their houses, toys and statues filling up all of their shelves, and you turned your backs on them. Comic book movie culture is, after all, only as good as the movies it gives us. And this was the year that the corporations, let's name names, Disney and Warner Brothers, failed.
No shit.
They made bad movies. What if they had made good movies? Yeah, that's exactly right. What if they had made good movies? If they had given fans what they wanted from the very beginning, we would have never been facing this sort of downhill trend. The temptation to point a finger at the producers and executives and vilify them for their shoddy product has always been there. Yeah, if you're not going to blame the people who make the thing, who can you blame? But now it's part of the new couch potato rebel culture. Critics, on their reflexive high horse, mostly hate comic book movies, and more they have used their reviews of them to chastise the man. Rightfully so. This is just coming off as a shill article now. The guy's trying to defend the corporations. These people hate you. That's all there is to it. They don't care about you, they don't care about the core audience or the legacy their characters have. You can tell they have a deep-seated hatred for their fans, and this guy's just going to jump into the line of fire to defend them. The fans would seem to be on the other side of the fence, but they have their own collective resentments and rebel fire. This year, the critics and the Comic-Con horde stood shoulder to shoulder, joining forces to look the suits in the eye and say, "You did this to us. We're bored as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore." 2023 seems to have been the tipping point, and 2024 is already being called the year that woke dies, because people have had enough of this stuff. At the end of the day, we all want exciting stories and fun adventures for our favorite characters. And not only that, but we want them to look and act like the characters they have always been throughout the decades-long runs. All that said, there's a larger reality about comic book movie culture that we tend to ignore, so let's state it outright. This shit is starting to fail because it is spent, because it's been used up. I'm not just talking about Ant-Man or The Flash, I'm talking about the characters who got us in the door in the first place. The iconic, larger-than-life characters, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, Captain America, Thor, the Hulk, Black Panther. They were the mythic engine of this thing, and for a good long stretch we didn't just want to see them on screen, we craved it. We needed them to be our gods again, and they were. Until they weren't. I disagree with everything this guy is trying to say here, because he's trying to pretend that characters like Captain America, Thor, the Hulk, and Black Panther were always heavy hitters before the movies came out. But I remember articles from just a few years back where they were claiming Marvel Studios was starting out with their B team because they didn't have the rights to characters like the X-Men and Spider-Man. Speaking of Spider-Man, Spider-Man No Way Home and Spider-Man Across the Multiverse are still making money, and the Batman was just greenlit for a sequel. Fact of the matter is, some of these heroes are so ingrained in pop culture that they will always make money. The former US President George W. Bush has long been used to illustrate the maxim. He was born on third base but thinks he's hit a triple. I don't understand that point. American politics are not everything, guys. A lot of these characters are bigger than American politics and have affected people left and right from all around the world. They've been around much longer than all of us and will be around after we are all long gone. Comic book movie culture is sort of like that. In the old days, i.e. the first 90 years of Hollywood, up to and including the Lucas-Spielberg revolution, movies were made the old-fashioned way. They were imagined, usually out of whole cloth. Sure, there were sequels and remakes. There were literally adaptations, highbrow and low. And Star Wars in 1977 riffed on the pulp sci-fi serials of the 40s and 50s, though the vast majority of the audience for George Lucas's film had never seen those serials. So yes, Hollywood has always been a great big recycling machine. To say that it's just a great big recycling machine is to imply that there are no original ideas, and that's one of my main points at the end of this video, that the people working in the entertainment industry are simply political activists masquerading as creatives. But there's a difference between imitation and IP. In 1978, when Hollywood gave us Superman, it was pinging off a magical comic book character who sprung deep from the well of American pop identity. Who didn't love Superman? And 11 years later, when Tim Burton's Batman premiered, producing the real sea change in the industry, I'll never forget the franchise frenzy that blanketed theaters the day that movie opened. It was like a deliverance. Unlike Star Wars, the Batman pedigree already occupied a place deep in the hearts of moviegoers. It spoke to comic book fans, to everyone who'd grown up with the late 60s TV series, not to mention the Dark Knight and Killing Joke graphic novel generation. You could certainly say that Burton delivered. In the gothic Wagnerian sweep, the palm buzzer demonism of Jack Nicholson's performance, but in another sense, you could say that the 1989 Batman was born on home plate and everyone in Hollywood thought it was a home run. I sound like I'm shortchanging the awesome craftsmanship that goes into a movie like Batman, or that has gone into so many of the Marvel and DC films. I'm not. I have great respect for the craft, sometimes a reverence for it, to the point that I've given a passing grade to more than my share of the comic book movies like Captain Marvel or The Expendables that critics weren't supposed to like. But here's the real point. The mass attachment to comic book movie culture has always been stepped in our connection to its most legendary characters. They were pure-cut cocaine of all IP, and for a while that created a fantasy movie-going high. The term IP stands for intellectual property, which means no matter what we are talking about, every movie, anything to come out of Hollywood, anything that has a copyright on it is an IP. And he seems to be trying to differentiate the two. They're the same thing. Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, was certainly right when he acknowledged, in an act of damage control, that the MCU had spread itself too thin, diluting its appeal with spin-off TV series, and a general sense of the multiverse as something that was becoming homework even for fans. Yet what's the solution? There's no real way to put the genie of too much product overkill back in the bottle, because the only way to solve that problem is with more product. Disney definitely has spread itself too thin, but to say that's the reason for their dwindling audiences is a blatant lie. Nobody with half a brain believes the reason nobody is going to see Phase 4 in theaters is because there's there's too much of it. James Gunn, with his role as executive guru, along with Peter Safran of DC Studios, now ready to wipe the slate clean and launch a new universe of DC storytelling, wants to fix it all with quality control. He's basically saying, fuck those Zack Snyder movies, my Superman will be boss. Yes, except his Superman is going to feel like it's about the 12th Superman. The 12th Superman? We've had, what, 4 Supermen ever? Compared to Batman, who gets a new actor every 5 years, or a Spider-Man who has had so many reboots I forget half of them whenever they come up in conversation. He's just going off into his own opinions here. This is becoming less of an article and more of a blog. Seems to me the media will blame anything other than what the actual problem is. The executives sitting in their Death Star suites were full of excuses this year. The movie got rushed into production. We overextended ourselves. And no one can blame them for the personal and legal imposition of Jonathan Majors. At the same time, the critical rebel establishment, speaking more than ever for fans, saw blood in the water, and with it the opportunity to help kill off the comic book movie culture it has come to regard as an existential threat to cinema. Again, blaming the fans instead of the people who are actually making this crap. Just shut up and consume. Go fuck yourself. But if the culture is now entering the early stages of its death throes, it will actually be for an honorable reason. Comic book movies were never going to die because an Ant-Man or Captain Marvel sequel was bad. The only reason they were going to die is that they had served their purpose. They made us dream of men and women in capes who could fly, and who seemed indestructible, because all of that made us feel good. But then it stopped making us feel so good, because we had already been there and dreamed that, and it was time perhaps to get back to reality. The writer of this article is a perfect example of a pop culture tourist, confusing his own opinions with facts and claiming that because he is sick of comic book movies, so must be everyone else. Trying to convince the reader that superheroes have served their purpose, and that they're spent. You can't tell me that in the not even 20 years superheroes have been treated with the same respect as any other genre, that Hollywood has gone through every single decent comic book story worth its salt. So my solution is this. Fire all of the quote-unquote creatives behind the scenes. Remove every single political activist masquerading as a writer and hire professionals who actually care about the characters you're bringing to the big screen. And most importantly, people who share the same values as your audience, like Chuck Dixon and Mark Miller. Stop listening to the Mark Wades and Anita Sarkeesians of the world, forget about your DEI requirements, and start hiring people based on merit. And finally, stop disrespecting these characters with pathetic race swaps and gender bending. Go back to basics, give the people true heroes who are fighting evil and saving the innocent, defeating monsters and having grand adventures while doing it. If you do all of that, you are sure to have a hit and the money will follow. I'm Dean James, your mate in comics from the land down under. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow.